My goal today was to connect it to our work yesterday, now moving into the concept of how do we create a more perfect union, to tie in yesterday's lesson and to launch the inquiry. They had to understand what a movement was, what people do to advocate, and the different strategies they use to prove their point. We had to launch the questions. So they had to know what abolitionists they had. I wanted them to work with their groups. We brainstormed the questions, and then in groups they're going to choose the 2 questions that they're going to use for their own inquiry. This is your group, and this is the abolitionist that you will be studying. So this is a series of 3 lessons, and we're going to kick it off today. Yesterday, we talked about events that divided our country and events that united our country. We talked about the assets and obstacles to making a more perfect union. What does that mean, a more perfect union? Turn and talk.
It's like trying to make the union better.
Like trying to make it better for the people.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are we going to use to guide us? Constitution, more specifically? You got it. What do we mean by a more perfect union? Tate.
Like that each change we take over the years makes us a more better union. Like each choice we make helps shape our Constitution.
Yeah, so we're thinking back to the preamble of the Constitution, right? We want to make things better. And what are we going to use? What do we mean by better?
We mean like trying to change in the right direction and make stuff more equal and more fair so everyone feels like they have a right and they have a say in what we do.
Are we as a country living up to our declared values, or are we more focused on other interests? What we talked about in the growth of the nation unit. And let's just look at some of these first to kind of refresh our memories. Who can find one that might be, that would help us become a more perfect union?
14, must obey the Constitution.
Must obey the Constitution. All right, say more. Why do you think that might help us?
Because the Constitution helps us like live on the land and has our declared values.
It does. In the preamble, it has our declared values, doesn't it? And if everybody has to follow the rules, that's fair. Right? Navia.
Number 1, we govern by the Constitution that says enslaved people who escaped from free states must return to their enslavers.
Do you think that one is going to help or a challenge? Challenge, right. We're not there yet. Yes, that would definitely challenge our idea of a more perfect union.
So number 14 is what you chose.
Now, when we're writing this, what don't I want to see when you make your claim? Love all the hands. Tia. I think. You want it, that sounds like an opinion. You want it to sound strong and clear, like a fact. I want you to use the question words so that anybody reading this doesn't need to have that question in front of them to understand your answer. So let me who wants to share what they're thinking for what will most help?
I think 14 will make the United States more perfect union because it's saying that everyone has to follow the same rule and the same government. Not everyone has something that's best for them. It's everyone, everyone has to have the same thing.
If we're writing this up, I'm going to start with the question words, okay? Which factor do you think will most help the United States create a more perfect union? I could make this a little bit stronger, to be honest, because it makes this sound like there's one factor, and I want the most important factor, right? So let me edit this, because you know what? Good writers revise. They edit. How can I make this stronger? How can I make this clearer? The most important factor that will help the United States create a more perfect union is that everyone follows the Constitution. So this was an exit ticket that I didn't get in yesterday, but I really felt it was important. I didn't want to let it go. So I started today's lesson with that. And I'm trying to get them to have those really good work habits and look at their work product. So not just worry about the content, but how are you presenting the information? So they all knew right off the bat. If you're going to make a claim, don't make it sound like an opinion. You have to be able to communicate your thinking in a clear, concise, compelling way. You want to start with the most or one? What sounds stronger, most or one? The most. What do you notice that I'm doing right now?
Taking words from the question.
Right.
So that you don't need the question to understand.
You got it. So now you pick up here. So start with create.
What?
This one means when things aren't fair. So that would be a good one.
Or is obeying a word?
Yes. Obeying the Constitution connects us closer to our declared values. Boom. Love the vocab. Love that you're getting in all the things we talked about from the last unit, and now you're incorporating it into this unit. Rock on. Can I read it?
Yeah.
Noah said, one thing that helped the United States create a more perfect union is when slavery was banned. One thing that challenged the United States from creating a more perfect union is when African Americans were treated unfairly. Great. It's strong, it's clear, excellent. We have been practicing and incorporating inquiry throughout all the units, which is great. So they're well versed in seeing the overarching question. So what do we need to know to answer that question? And I love that there's no right answer. So they're going to be looking at primary sources and secondary sources. And those words fly out of their mouths. They use them all the time. They use them in their writing. And it's now incorporated. We've looked at events that united and divided us, and today we're going to focus on the challenge that slavery posed to our country and to us becoming a more perfect union. What type of movements do you think were important during the early republic? So when we think about the early republic, we're thinking about issues. What do you think, Shankly, what do you think people would want to change in society back then, and why? And I know there's an obvious answer, but I'm going to challenge you, see if you can come up with some other movements that people might have been concerned about at that time. James?
The child labor laws.
Child labor laws. They didn't exist back then. Can you imagine being 5 years old and working in a factory? Shankly?
The Indian Removal Act.
The Indian Removal Act, and I see some Me Too's on that. So certainly advocating for indigenous rights and against encroachment. Can anybody think of any others?
Whaling in Nantucket?
Whaling? All right, so as like an animal activist? Nice, I didn't think of that one. Camden?
How, people had the mindset of men were, more important than women.
Okay, yes. So we know from our previous research that an abolitionist is someone who works to end slavery. And these were three that we've already studied: Elizabeth Key Grinstead, Benjamin Lay, and Jenny Slew. And if you remember, they had different methods. Does anybody remember what Elizabeth did?
Court, I think.
She did. She used the court system. What about Benjamin Lay?
He kidnapped a enslaver's son.
Yes, he kidnapped an enslaver's son. Jenny Slew,
She held abolitionist meetings.
she used the court system. One of them was in Virginia and one of them was in Massachusetts, and I think she was Virginia. In 1630, when abolitionist Elizabeth Key Grinstead was born, there were 59 enslaved people in the colonies. By 1850, a little more than 200 years later, mainly because of the expansion of cotton, there were more than 3 million enslaved people in the United States. And this is after, fifth graders, this is after the international slave trade had ended. So this is the question we're answering. How did the abolitionist movement work to create a more perfect union? Now, if you'll remember, all year we've been writing questions, And we have two categories of questions. We have the basic W's, who, what, when, where. And then you have your higher order questions, how, why, what does it mean that. Those are more sophisticated, and we've been working on those. So we were going to make some questions today, and we're actually going to brainstorm as a group, and I'm going to list them because tomorrow you and your partners are going to choose two of the questions that you're going to answer in your research. Now, we're going to identify some key words here. What words do you already know? Isaac, give me one. Abolitionist. So I'm going to put this here. Someone who wants to end slavery. Union. When we're talking about the Union, we're talking about the United States. Tia?
The preamble.
The preamble. I love that you were more specific. I'm going to have you work with your group, and you're going to come up with two questions at least.
How long does it take to persuade the people?
Oh, how effective. How hard was it to persuade the people? Love it. What else would you want to know? If you're answering this question, what would you need to know?
What actions did they take?
What were their methods, right? We're going to make a list of these types of questions that you're generating right now, and then you and your group are going to choose two to guide your research. Noah, you got a question for me, honey?
How successful were they?
Who's they?
The abolitionists.
Gemma.
How does abolition persuade?
Can I throw in our vocabulary word? How did they advocate? Good. Daphne?
What were the abolitionist ideas and opinions?
Zenzi?
How did the abolitionists help abolish slavery?
Which is the perfect way to bring us back to our overarching question, how did the abolitionist movement work to create a more perfect union?